Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us wherever in the world you're listening to us from, whatever platform you're listening to us on. As I say every episode, thank you so much for the continued support, the continued positive messages, and just overall sharing this podcast with others as we continue to grow, continue to reach new audiences. Sincerely appreciate it, and looking forward to getting into this episode with you. And this episode is going to take a little bit of a different approach because it's not necessarily focused on one specific topic or one specific thing that we're nailing down in particular, but it's going to be more broad and more in general about general lessons that my guest has learned and things that my guest has seen and experienced and worked with in his time in a lot of different fields and professions within the basketball world. And our topic in particular is going to be about lessons that my guest learned from great teams, from great coaches, and just general great coaching tips that he's picked up along the way on his journey. There's a lot of things that my guest has on his resume, including being an author, a consultant, a motivational speaker, and of course, a basketball coach. So a lot of different things that we can get into and a lot of different things that we can talk about. And I know I'm going to learn from this. I know you as a listener are going to learn from this and just become that much better as coaches afterwards. So my guest today to talk about these lessons that he has learned from great teams, as I said, author, consultant, motivational speaker, and of course, basketball coach. Very happy to be joined by Coach Dan Horwitz. Coach, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to join us. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Mike. And I appreciate the praise, but I'm just excited to have a great conversation with you.
As am I. Really looking forward to seeing some of the things you've seen, listen about some of the experiences you've had and some of the lessons you've learned along the way. Now, usually I ask him this question about the basketball journey and where that's taken you, but with all the different avenues that you've taken on, there's so many different journeys that you've kind of taken on and steps you've been on along the way. So I'm going to kind of almost open this up to interpretation, this question about basically your basketball journey, but I guess maybe even greater than that, your journey overall and all the different steps that you've taken along the way to get where you're at right now.
Yeah. So I don't like to talk about myself too much, so I'll just give the listeners, just a few, I guess, main points. But I grew up just loving basketball, like probably majority of everybody listening, and loved playing at recess in elementary school and playing with my twin brother and older brother, and just had a lot of fun with it and had some really good coaches growing up that just cared about me as a person. And that really inspired me to want to be a coach one day. So when I was in high school, I played for the high school team, but I was able to help out with the 10 to 12-year-old level that I played for, and still friends with that coach to this day. And that just shows the impact that one person can really have on your life through the game of basketball or any sport. And went on to play Division III basketball at Newberry College in Boston. And we went 13-87, so lost a lot of games. So I know what not to do. And then I spent a lot of time studying the best teams in the country. And for a few years, I called the winner of the Division III National Championship coach just to talk for 20 to 30 minutes about, what kind of happened with their season and how they were so successful. And that's kind of where I kind of got my niche, I guess you could call it, of just calling and either talking on the phone or going to a practice or a game to learn from these incredible people, and just hopefully can share some of those things that I've learned with your audience and help their teams, just improve maybe by 1%. Then this podcast episode would be worth it for me.
Absolutely. And I agree, and anything that I think helps coaches just get a little bit better, give them something to think about. I know we all as coaches definitely value that. And I know one of the experiences that you've had is work being a team building consultant, and that's something that I was curious about and wanted you just to expand on a little bit about what type of work do you do as like a team building consultant? What sort of work is involved in kind of building that camaraderie in a general sense that maybe could just be applied to any facet of work?
Yeah, the camaraderie is a great word that you just used, and I think that's just, like if you summed it up, it's kind of like family. Like you just get to know the people that are around you, and whether it's a sports team or a work team or your a family, you're not always going to get along with everybody, but I think if you lead with love and lead with a place of empathy, and care for one another and respect, you can accomplish some really good things together. And if a team reached out to me, I'll use a basketball example, but there was a team that was pretty disconnected that I worked with, and they had a really big roster, so it's understandable that it would be hard to have all those guys buy in. So we picked a few things after watching some film that they could do on the court that would bring them more together, and they really emphasized that. And I think that's what it comes down to, is the leader, whoever it is, emphasizing those things that they really believe in, and prioritizing those things over maybe running a baseline out of bounds play. Maybe it's more important to take 10 minutes to talk as a team, or have them pair up with somebody they don't know well, and get to know them, and just doing little things like that to kind of build that trust among each other, and just continue to chase whatever the vision of that team or that job is, to be the best it can be. So it really varies depending on the need of that specific group, but it's been fun to do some of that stuff.
And I've always gotten the sense, at least in my experience as coaching, is that idea of like team building and building that trust, like you said, is something that has to be a continual process. It can't just be something that's like done at the beginning and then kind of just assume that it's worked out, that it's like something that needs to be continually emphasized, continually worked on, and just built upon. Otherwise some things might get frayed, and things could fall apart a little bit. I don't know if that's an experience that you've had as well, or something maybe that you believe in as well.
Yeah, well, I think with my current team, I'm a JV boys coach and the middle school boys coach, the assistant for the middle school team. And when your better players are your best leaders, you're in a really good position. And I think every day you're tested as a coach as to what behaviors you're allowing, and which ones you're going to be really strict about. And I'm, still learning every day on how to best handle that. I'll try to do it one-on-one. I'll try to do it in front of the team. I don't like to punish with running or anything like that, but I definitely have learned that sometimes will work. And clearly it doesn't always get sustained, like you mentioned, like you have to keep working at it. But I just try to find creative ways of these behaviors that you're going to allow in your environment, and that help promote a very safe environment where everybody feels valued, where they have a voice, and they feel empowered to be the best version of themselves. But I do have a question for you, Mike.
Yeah.
In regard to team building, is there a favorite exercise that you've done either with your basketball team, or just maybe outside of sports as well?
I know that at least with my basketball team, something that they've always really enjoyed doing is so where I work at, it's an open campus where there's multiple buildings within the campus itself. So it's not necessarily confined to one high school building. And something that they've loved doing, and we've done it every year, is they go on a scavenger hunt throughout the campus, and they have to go identify certain things, and they go with a partner, and then they are running around the building trying to find different little artifacts or different things that are around campus. Then they take pictures of them and their partner next to those things. It's called a selfie scavenger hunt. They love doing that sort of thing. So they like that. There's activities that I've done, even with partners or for groups, that I think are pretty interesting, and they do translate to basketball, where they do a partner drawing activity where one partner has to describe a picture that's up on like a projector, and then the partner can only draw based on what's being described to them. And so it's an interesting little like teamwork and camaraderie builder and things of that nature. So those are kind of more on like the simple, more fun levels. And I think as I've had teams that have gotten closer to each other, I even find in terms of team building, sometimes the good old fashioned type of like show and tell, or just bring something, that has, importance or significance to you, and why, and have that conversation and be able to share that like vulnerability with their teammates. Once that initial trust has been built, I found that to be really powerful as well. So those are a few things I got off the top of my head. I'm sure when we're done talking, I can think of more, but there's a few at least.
Those are three really, really good ones. And I'll have to, when I re-listen to this, write those down. And I haven't done any of those ones yet. I've heard of a few of them, but that's why, I'm happy to do things like this so I can share it with my team. So thanks for sharing those.
Happy to help. Happy to help. I think that it's always interesting to put your players in a position where they have to work together, or complete a task that's maybe like abstract to them, something that isn't necessarily school related or basketball related, but something, whether it's just like a scavenger hunt or just some sort of like the old how big of a tower can you make out of like toothpicks and marshmallows sort of thing, something that kind of stretches them a little bit, where it maybe the answer isn't necessarily concrete. You never know what sort of creativity or imagination you might get out of your players when you kind of push them in that way.
Yeah, and it's fun and they laugh, and it's just a great way for them to see each other and you as a coach outside of the lines of the basketball court. So that's it's fun.
Especially if, and I'm sure you could speak to this too, especially doing something like that. I think if your team is maybe going through a bit of a stretch or a lull, or that burnout is starting to creep in, I think any of those sort of things that take away maybe from basketball and just work on something else kind of might be what your team needs to be to do, sort of to just like reset and kind of get back on track and take that little break away from basketball.
And going off of that, I think right now is such a unique time where kids, need that laughter, and that they always do, but especially now when there's with COVID going on, and you and I were mentioning how your game got canceled for this week or for tomorrow, and mine for Wednesday, and we just found out today, like that. I guess coaches, that hurts us, but think about these kids that they just want to play some basketball, and so I think trying to lead with that in mind is really important. So things like this that you just mentioned are great alternatives. Like, hey, we don't have a game, but we're gonna take a bunch of marshmallows and see who can stack them the highest. Just turn a negative into a positive.
Yeah, for sure. I know. I'm 100% with you. And it's all about kind of the outlook that you kind of take. Those sort of things will definitely have a big impact. Like you said, kind of turning that negative to a positive for sure. So one of the unique experiences that I know you've had is that you've talked to different coaches. You've I'm sure read a lot, had a lot of interactions with people, a lot of interactions with teams. And so as we kind of transition to the topic about the lessons that you've personally learned from great teams or from the great coaches you worked with, kind of wanted to start in the general sense about what you've kind of picked up on as kind of like trends or things that you've noticed that both, great teams and great coaches kind of have in common with one another.
Yeah. So I'll preface it by saying I'm very, very fortunate to have had some incredible coaches welcome me into their practices and games. And like you said, I've read books, because I think it's a great way to gain knowledge. And yeah, so losing a lot in college really just inspired me because we were playing teams that were really good, and I was just I guess very interested in how they were able to play so well together, and the guys on the bench or girls on the bench, like how they were just so involved in the game despite not playing, and and so I picked up some principles that I call them, and I have 14 that I believe build a championship culture. There's a lot more that goes into that, but as a foundation, I think some of these things will help the listeners, give them new perspective or just validate things they're already doing. So the first one, I live in Connecticut, and I went to a UConn women's practice, and the thing that stood out to me the most out of like the 2.5 hour practice was the first 15 minutes when they did their dynamic warm-up, and they were just in complete unison from sideline to sideline in their stretching. Like it looked like a choreographed dance routine, and it was so cool. And somebody echoed the call, like if it was high knees, and everybody would yell high knees, and they would go from one sideline to the other. And it was just like so well orchestrated that like the fact that they were so intentional with just their warm-ups, was amazing. And then when I really thought more about it, there's a few things that really stood out. And one, it's like, for when practice starts, like practice starts, and like UConn women, like one of the best teams in the country, this is how the way we warm up is no different than the way we play in our games, and just the way we go about our business. So I was really impressed with that. But it also eliminates side conversations. Like at the high school level, these kids see each other a lot throughout the day, but
Sure.
and so they have time to at lunch and stuff like that to talk. So when they get to practice, at making sure that they're all locked in, and whether it's dynamic warm up or just counting together, that's a great way to make sure everybody's on the same page and displaying unity from the start. And so that's one that I really emphasized. And I actually printed out a card for my team, and it says like knee hugs, and they all yell knee hugs. So it basically bolds. It's basically in bold. In quotes, it tells them exactly what to say. And then today in practice, I was like, who's never led the warm up? Because the same kids usually want to do it. And they're called the leader of the day. So there's two kids that, kind of shyly raise their hand. So I put them next to each other so they could help each other out. And I was like, you guys just alternate. And they did a really good job. And I just thought that was a great way to give them a leadership opportunity, and two kids that don't really play a lot. And they did a good job, and we clapped for them after. And I think that's a great way to kind of build that culture directly from the beginning. And the last thing I'll say is one kid from my team in our last game was like, hey coach, like I think this is really good, this unity warm up, because when I looked at the other team, they're just kind of nonchalantly shooting layups. So the fact that they're kind of noticing it, that means so much more coming from them than me talking about UConn women, and and sharing that with them. It's great to like have them empowering each other and talking about it.
And I think that as coaches, one of the things that we always are stressed about is that we never have enough time for anything, and that we're trying to maximize every single second and every single minute that we can. And I think that if that's truly something that we're trying to do, then we really have to be intentional about like everything, even if it is exactly the way that we do warm-ups, or the way that we even talk during warm-ups or don't talk during warm-ups. I think that all of those things that are, if they're intentionally planned out and have a purpose behind them, and the players are bought into it, then you just sort of maximize your practice time a little bit more. And I think that I get the sense that the players, one, get more out of it, and two, and you could talk about especially the experience that the UConn women that you mentioned about, that they're like dialed in from the beginning, because they start out so dialed in, right?
Exactly.
And that's something that I think I know it's from time to time that I'm sure I've struggled with before, where that like transition from warming up to like getting to do what we need to do is like, there's like almost that like disconnect where it's like we're still like not ready to go, or still like not completely like serious or focused on what we're trying to do. It's like, well, maybe it's because we didn't have the level of attention to detail that we needed at the very beginning. And if we had fixed that, or we correct that, then we don't necessarily have to try and like restart right after warmups and get serious again, sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's so funny because like you see UConn women, you're like, oh, I can show my team how to do this, and every day, like it's a constant battle of like,
Yeah.
gosh, what do we do when somebody yells the warm up? We're supposed to echo it, coach. And like sometimes they're great, and then sometimes like it's just But I just keep doing it, keep saying it, and then we've only played 4 games in this short season. So, and I really, the best thing about basketball is like you can look down the other end of the court and compare yourself to the other team, and with these behavior things, not making baskets, but like, hey, we're like really locked in our warm-ups right now, and the other team is fooling around, and that team still might beat us by however many points, but like we know like what to do, we know what's expected of us, and we're trying to display like how much of a team we are, and they're starting to notice that. Would you mind if I shared a few more of the principles?
Let's do it.
Yeah, so like I said, none of these are my thoughts. Just watched other teams and took a lot of notes. And the principle number 2 is touches. So in layup lines, I think that's a great way. This is kind of like the progression. The principles are like you warm up and then say you went into layup lines with it before a game. And so my team, I currently have 17 kids on my JV team. We do not cut anybody. So everybody who tries out is on the team. And then the other players is 12 on varsity. And so it's hard. It's really hard to build a culture with 17 kids, and we split the team into 2. They all practice together, but I have practice every day from 3 to 4 o'clock. So I have 1 hour, and my dynamic warm up usually takes, in my little talk before, will take about 10 minutes. And then I have 50 minutes to work with. So like you said, being very intentional is important. And so touches, I think just giving somebody a high five when you run by them is so important. And I know as a player, like I really tried to emphasize that. And so in layup lines, they weren't giving each other high fives when they ran by each other. And I said, guys, my assistant coach is awesome. Loves the culture stuff. So we're just bought into that. He stood on one side, I stood on the other. We didn't watch the hoop at all. And if somebody missed a high five, I said, we're going to, run a 17 on the sideline or whatever it was. And, every kid gave a high five. They didn't want to run. And that's not like how I want to coach, but I had to be creative. And, I guess they really didn't want to run. So we started to build that habit. And they do a good job with it now. But, I had to do that. And some coaches will say, don't use running as a punishment. And I've always thought that I never would do that. But, for that scenario, it worked. And then like today, a big thing we do that a friend of mine shared, when we call for a water break or a break of anything, because they don't always all get water if they're in good shape. I'll say, give 5 teammates a high five. And they all run around and give 5 teammates a high five. And so you're forcing the touches. And there was an NBA study saying the teams that touch more win more. So, I share that with them, and I share Tufts University, one of the best Division III women's teams in the country. A buddy of mine, his sister was on the team, and they like always high five, fist bump, pat on the back. So all those little things are technically touches, and just build that connection among teammates. So that's one that we've really emphasized. And I was curious for you, if you've emphasized touches or anything cool that you've seen over the years.
Oh, well, I'm a big proponent of anything on whether it's on a drill or especially in a game. There's a couple things that we really emphasize. Number one, anytime you receive a good pass or you receive something positive, good screen, good pass, something, you have to acknowledge it. Everything should be communicated in one form or the other, whether it's a good outlet pass, a good rebound. If there was something that you were able to do because of what somebody else did for you, that has to be acknowledged. Now, I will say, with the caveat of that, sometimes players don't know when a player did something well, so they might not acknowledge their teammate because they weren't aware of what a teammate did, which is okay. We can talk and explain that and explain what their teammate did, like on a pin down screen or something that later helped them, score, put them in a position to be successful. But that's a big one that we definitely emphasize. I really like the idea of touches. I just don't know if I've been consistent about it, but I definitely know that there is science behind it. I've definitely heard of like the idea of touches and going on. And I think that's something I definitely would like to get back to. And the other thing that I've really started to emphasize, and it's funny you talked about running, but one of the things I've really started to emphasize with my team is pretty much anytime you're on the court itself, you don't walk from anything, whether you're going from like the second you touch the court, you're at least jogging, and you're at least running or jogging from one spot to the other. And I think the teammates like to encourage that. They'll call each other out on it. And it's just like a little trick. I don't know if trick is the right word, but it sort of puts it in the player's mind that, oh, if I'm on this basketball court, I shouldn't be walking anywhere. Like this,
Yeah.
whether I'm getting off the court because I'm getting subbed out, or whether obviously if I'm playing and I'm in transition, or, pressing or getting pressed or whatever the case may be. I think it just, I don't know if it's subconsciously just plants that seed of just like more hustle being there. And players, they encourage each other and kind of make sure that everybody's hustling the way that they need to be, transitioning from one thing to the other. I think the other thing I like about that too, and again, I'm getting better at really being about that. I kind of wasn't when I first started coaching, but I think the other thing, if you emphasize that, and that's something that really matters to you, is that you'll just save practice time. You'll
Yes.
maximize your practice time if it's been instilled that no matter what we're doing, if you're on the court, you're at least jogging or running from one spot to the other. Even if they're on the baseline, I need somebody to come out to half court to do something for me. Like, at the very least, hopefully remember, got to jog to get there. Those are just a few things that came off the top of my mind. But I am curious, because I know this exists, but I just don't know it off the top of my head. What this is there like a science behind touches? Is that what it is? Like the connection that gets formed when you actually like high five or touch someone, that like some sort of bond or some synapse there like fires in the brain that like creates camaraderie? I don't know. I know there has to be something behind it. I'm sure I've read it.
Yeah, that's not my background.
Some
The
brain
science
science.
behind it, I know there is science behind the brain side. There is something behind it. But I think, if you put us our two brains together, I think it's just like it shows that you have somebody's back, and like you're willing to encourage them when they're doing well, or pick them up if they didn't do something well. And it's more fun. Like, I think you don't feel like you're alone when you're doing something, or when you do something well, that somebody like points to you, like you said, like, good pass, Mike. Like, that makes you want to go, drive and pass it back to me again, because like, that I appreciate it. And so, yeah, I don't know what the science is, but they've written about it, and it's true when they watch the Golden State Warriors giving all these high fives and they're winning. I think they're onto something. So
That is true.
yeah.
That is true. And if it's good enough for them to give touches to one another, then who, there has to be something to it. No, I like that. Or were there any other things in particular that you had stood out? I know you had a list there. I didn't know if you touched all of them. I want to make sure I gave you the opportunity if you hadn't.
I'm ready to go. Yeah, I got 14. I
it.
think I've shared 2, but I'm not going to share all of them. But when people ask me, like, which ones are the most important, and I'm like, I think they're all important, but if I had to narrow them down, and these are the biggest 2 that I've emphasized this season. And this is my first year coaching this JV team, because prior I had been an assistant Division III coach for 3 years. And so from watching teams that we've played, the teams that help each other up. So the name of my book is Help Them Up, and it's 14 principles to educate, energize, and empower your team to build a championship culture. And though, and helping each other up is my twin brother, Ben. He was always the best at this when we would play together. If I fell or anybody on our team fell over, he'd be the first one to run over and help them up and pat them on the back. So, and I just think that alone, because that happens a lot in basketball. And obviously, if the game's still going on, some of my kids were like, "Coach, I wanted to help them up, but I don't know what to do." I was like, "No, you run back on defense." But when the play stops, that's when you run over and help your teammates up and check on them. And I just feel like when you fall on the ground, you're probably sacrificing your body for the team. And so it's important to run over to them. And Villanova in the Final Four a few years ago, Brunson, the point guard who's in the NBA now, got knocked over. And within 3 seconds, all 4 teammates sprinted over and helped him up. And Jay Wright, the coach, started taking a few steps over to help him up, and he saw his team running in, and he just took a step away, and he knew that they were going to help him up. And me and my twin brother, my older brother, we both were like, "Go, like, run that back so we can record it." And it went viral and kind of went all over the place in the sports world, and I'm sure you probably remember seeing that. And so we really emphasize help them up. And honestly, Mike, we had a game the other day, and like I said, the kids are still kind of getting to know me, and I'm getting to know them. And they helped. We were winning, and I was like, "Guys, one of their players fell over a few minutes ago, and not a single person on their team helped him up." And so it happened again, and 3 of my guys, not even in the front, they all picked him up from the back and just scooped him right up. And I was so proud of them. And I know we have footage of it on the iPad somewhere that hasn't been uploaded yet. But like those are the moments that I think are really special. So helping your teammates up and also helping up the other teams, that shows what kind of kids you have and really good sportsmanship. And the teams I've watched that aren't great in terms of their culture, those are the ones that usually leave their teammate on the ground. And I think I even heard LeBron James, within the past year or two, he was mic'd up and somebody fell over and he said, don't ever get up. He said, we'll run over and help you up. So if LeBron James, I know there's some people probably love him, some people probably don't, but that's a really important one. And then the other one is huddling up. So that can happen right after a foul. Our team did that the other day, and that was a first for us to really help somebody up. 2 guys, one grabbed one hand, one grabbed the other, and they went right into this huddle. And we practice it every day. Like I'll call a foul. That wasn't a foul. That was a block. I did it today. And they all look at me, coach. I was like, huddle. And I have a hand signal where it might put my hands above my head to huddle up. And they've gotten really good at it. And I think that is probably the most important thing that a team can do with their culture, because after a foul against your team is when kids want to yell at a ref or yell at a teammate or yell something across the court to me as the coach or whatever it may be. And when your team is just pulling each other, arms around each other, connect and communicate something positive, whether it's, hey, we gotta make sure we don't get a backdoor cut on us next time, or hey, you got to call out that screen. Like just communicate something positive and then move on to the next play, opposed to 5 players going in 5 different directions. That I think has been very instrumental in our team's success. And a few of my players have shared, or somebody today said, we have the huddle power. And I've never heard that phrase before. And this is one of those players that doesn't play a lot, but he's a great kid and he tries, and they're kind of buying into this culture, and we've won a few games. So I think that also helps build a little credibility. We're 3-1, and they've all been close games, but these culture things really matter to me. My job is to prepare them for the varsity, for those that are going to be able to make it. And I promise, those coaches that I'll, be giving them good teammates, and I'm going to keep challenge them, with their skill levels as well. So helping them up and huddling up on offense and defense after any shooting foul would be the 2 things that I think teams should do. And you got to practice it every day, because in a game, the biggest challenge we face is players focusing on their parents or the varsity team when they watch us, or their friends, and they get an and one, and the last thing they want to do is huddle up with their teammates. They want to put their arms over their head and show off their muscles and something like that. So I'm yelling like a maniac for them to huddle up, and they've started to buy into it, and I'm really proud of that. And that's one of the biggest things I've taken from some of these really good college teams.
I think one of the cool things about huddling, and I've definitely seen it done before, and I think one of the things that is really effective about it is it almost serves as like a transition from whatever just happened to whatever needs to happen next, whether it's good or bad. It kind of serves as that, like, okay, this awesome thing happened, great, here's what we have to do next. Or this bad thing happened, all right, here's our huddle transition, this is the next thing that has to happen. It creates like a sense of moving on that's like explicit. Like you said, it's explicitly taught, and I feel like that could be something really powerful, rather than, like you kind of mentioned, like 5 players who have to react, and they react their own way to a certain event, and then almost like, maybe if your camaraderie isn't that great or whatever, hoping for the best on whatever the next series of events is.
Yeah, and my twin brother, he coaches at Hobart William Smith in Geneva, New York, and they made it to the Sweet 16 2 years ago, and then the COVID canceled the season, and they huddle up every single time, and that's the team I use as my example in the book. And it was just incredible because the teams they were playing weren't doing it, and at that level, Sweet 16s of Division III, like they're doing something right, and all the culture stuff was really good. And their bench, like they had probably 10 or more guys on the bench holding up the 3-point sign and all that fun stuff. And honestly, with my team, I've struggled a little bit with that. I was wondering if there's anything that you've done, to get the bench engaged. And I think, sometimes the kids are just, I guess, coached through their youth career to really be good teammates, and some need to be taught it. And so I think I'm kind of balancing a little bit of both, and wondering if you have any suggestions on the bench, just in terms of being all in and being ready for your opportunity. But if, you don't get to play, then how are you going to impact the game?
Yeah, I think that it really depends on kind of the situation that you find your team or your program in. But I know that I've seen some really, really powerful examples of even coaches who point out like the way the bench is acting, and especially in a positive manner, like on film, like they make it a part of like
Mm,
the film itself. And if the energy was up and the energy was going well, and I've seen examples, and I've done it a few times, or even players have positively called out like things that they heard from the bench, or things that they said, or things that they did or noticed that helped them, or inspired them, or kind of kept their energy up. And um, I think that just always kind of acknowledging, and always kind of, you know, making sure that your bench understands that they have a role to play, whether it is, being the next person up, or whether it is to, be that energy person, or whether it is to um call out something, or do something inspirational. And I think the other thing that I think it's important for coaches to emphasize is that any success that your players have, whatever your starters, the ones who get the most minutes, whatever success they have, also is in part due to the way that the whole team practices. And you
mm,
can't get a really good practice, or do that free on free shell, or any of these other types of drills or things you want to work on, unless your bench players are willing to push your starters, and push those guys or girls who are getting a lot of minutes to being the best that they can. And I think that maybe we sometimes take that for granted, but we can't overstate just how important that is, that even if those players may only get a few minutes here and there, that all the work they're doing to help their teammates is what's overall making the team better.
yeah, I love that. I love that. Like, it's everybody has a role, and I know in college, there's a few games where I started, and then a lot of games where I sat way at the end of the bench and either didn't get subbed in, or got subbed in for the last minute or two, if we were winning or mostly losing by a lot. But me and my best friend, DeRay, he and I would try to be the hype guys on the bench and cheer, defense, and be the water boys, and all that stuff. And we loved it because we were still, part of the team and trying to help. So, it's
and,
great that
and
everybody has their role.
I don't think that can be overstated, especially when you're playing some of these rivalry games, or some of these games on the road where
Mhm.
you might have a packed house for the other team. I mean, it's pretty comforting, I think, to know, even when you go on the road, for your starters and your players, to know that there's people who got your back, and are
Mm.
cheering, or being inspiring, or still keeping the energy level up. And just to know that you have that little section of a few, even on your bench, that got you there, that could be more than enough to maybe drown out some of the other things that might cause a lot of pressure for those players to feel on like a tough road game.
Yeah, actually, an idea or not idea, but a thought popped in my head when you said that. There's a, a good friend of mine. His name is Mark. He said that they give a juice player of the game, that it was the best teammate that's bringing the juice, bringing the energy, the positive vibes, and they'll give that player a Gatorade, and they watch film and they praise him, kind of like what you said. And so that's, a great way to incentivize, that behavior as well. You hope they do it, but they want that Gatorade or whatever it may be. And I told my team, we haven't taken the charge all year. And my assistant coach mentioned, he was like, hey, we should incentivize that. And I was like, you're right. So we didn't say what the prize is yet. But they're all like, oh, I want to do it now. So, I'll have to keep you updated if that happens.
I like that.
But that's something good. And I will say, like, for timeouts, it was another principle. I think when it's a full timeout, having all of the players that are on the bench link up and put their arms around each other to kind of shield off the coach, who, I usually take a knee, and then the 5 players will be on the bench. That's a really good way to show how united the team is, and connected. Because if you look at the other bench, sometimes they're looking into the crowd, or they're not paying attention to the coach. And so that's a great way to show unity during timeouts. And then a 30-second timeout, everybody puts their arms around each other, and and I usually just kind of let them talk, and share what's going on. And also, that makes sure that all the players know exactly what's going on, and that when their opportunity comes, they, hopefully will be paying attention and know how to execute it. So, those are the two positives from that. And then the last thing is the accountability circle that I do at the end. And that's from Coach Mantegna at Blair Academy. And I'm sure there's a lot of different coaches that do their own thing, but I leave at least 5 minutes for us to meet as a team. We do our team clap. I don't know what it'll sound like on the mic, but we go, and everybody kind of slowly does it. And again, that's something I'm like, can we do it again as a team? Because even the clap, sometimes they're not always locked in. So it's just constant culture, but I love it. And it's worth all the exhausting words that I have to use. And my assistant does a great job, like I said, of doing that. And a few of our leaders on the team do a good job. But we do a clap, we put our arms around each other. And then I'm like, what are a few things we did well today? They'll share. What are a few things we need to do better? And, sometimes it's hard to have these kids share some of their thoughts, but we do it every day. So they're getting better and better. And then we end with shout outs. So I'll be like, hey, Mike, Mike did a really good job running back on defense today, calling out who he was guarding, and then finish the play with a box out. And if he does that every time, like, I know we'll have a chance to be competitive in every game. If he does that along with everybody else on this team, and then we'd say 2 claps and then everybody claps. And today we only had 5 people, if that, maybe 4, share that. And, as a coach, you want them to look like we had a 90-minute practice. It was the only time we had the full gym in 90 minutes. We usually have half a gym with 3 hoops, 1 main hoop in an hour. And today was like our Super Bowl. Like, it was so awesome.
Yeah.
And so you'd like to think that, in 90 minutes they picked, they saw their teammate do at least one thing well. But you got to meet them where they are and just keep, I guess, emphasizing these things. So I'm still learning a lot, but I love that, like, I'm able to really experiment some of these things I've learned from the best coaches, and now I can use a lot of the things I learned from you and just keep getting better.
I love it. And I think that, as I've said to, a few coaches I've talked to, and people who even ask me about things in terms of my own coaching practices, I'm just sort of like a accumulation of a bunch of things I've learned along the way, that I think almost everything I've done is just something I've picked up along the way, or taken from somebody, or I can attribute to someone. And that's part of the power of the conversations you've had, the conversations I get to have, is all the things that we get to pick up on along the way, and steal it in the best sense of the word, is steal it, but use it to help the players that we serve. And one of the things that sometimes can get a little bit of tricky, I guess would be the best word for it, is that balance between having the most highly competitive program you can, but also like maintaining that positivity and maintaining that energy. And we touched on a couple of things about the huddles and the taps and rhythmic clapping that you went over, which I think is really cool. Is there anything else that kind of comes to mind about kind of that balance of maximizing and being as competitive and going after it as much as you can, but also reeling it in the sense that you're still maintaining that positive energy?
Yeah, that's a great question. And probably one that every coach wants to know the answer to. Like, how can we get the most out of our players, be competitive, and it's not all kumbaya, but also be, when the whistle stops for practice or the game, like, then we're all good. And I think the players really look at the coach and see how they react. So I would say that's the first part of it. Like, if a coach is yelling at the ref or the players, then they think that's okay. And so I try not to yell at the ref, and I try not to yell at my guys. I'll have a tough conversation one-on-one, like, hey, I need more from you, but I've never been one that I wanted to get yelled at, and I just want to know what I can do better, because I'm already so hard on myself. And in the beginning of the year, I got a piece of paper or a document, and I asked a bunch of questions. I said, what's one thing we need to know about you as a player? And they all filled it out. And one of my players said, I like to be yelled at. And I've yet to do that to him, but I know that he's aware of how he interprets, being communicated to. And so learning your players, I think, is the first step of having a really competitive program, because once like what their why is, like why they're playing basketball, and their motivation for being there, that's when you can really set them up and create a practice plan that really challenges them. Like, hey, I want to win. Well, if you want to win, then we're going to do this defensive drill, for 10 minutes, because that's what's going to, I believe as a coach, is going to help us win. And just watching some of the best programs, like Swarthmore College, I'm a big Division III guy. They were the number one team in the country a few years ago as well, and they have an unbelievable culture program. And like you can just tell, like when they get a rebound, like their 2 and 3 guard like sprint to the corners, and their 5-man sprints, they rim run, which just means from one rim to the other, and then the four man's trailing, so they can go right into a secondary break, and then the point guard's pushing the ball up one of the sidelines, and they're just like almost robotic in a sense. Like they sprint, they know their spots, and then defense, they all sprint back, they all point, and they all talk and who they're guarding. And so like you said, that like transition time, like when you huddle up and there's a play stopped, their transition time from like a live play, the switching possession is like unbelievable. And I'm sure that they practice like that. I've yet to go to a practice like that, but I've watched them a few times in person, and like everything they do is just so like amazing. No, it doesn't. And the timeout stuff that I said, like being connected, like that I learned that from them, and they hold each other's shorts, which looks very funny, but their coach said, hey guys, you got to stay connected. And they chose to just hold it like with their like left and right. They just kind of pinched like on the shorts. And it looked funny, but like that was the number one team in the country. So like, they could do whatever they want. And so I think it's all these culture things that like bond the team together. And then in practice, like there's ways to push guys. Like we did a one-on-one closeout drill that I learned in college, where Mike, if you were the coach on the wing, and I'm the player, I would be under the hoop chopping my feet, and one of my teammates would be on the opposite wing, and when you take the ball and do a skip pass over your head, I close out on them, and they get 3 dribbles, and if they scored on me, they stay. But if they stay, and then if I got scored, I have to sprint down and back, and then I'd get in line, and the other players are on the baseline under the hoop. And then if I got to stop, I'd go on offense, and the player that got stopped goes under the hoop. And that's just like that. Our guys like competed. We did it on both sides of the court today, because we had the whole court, and like that was just a great way for them to compete. They were laughing, but like they were getting a lot better at contesting the shot and closing out. And so those are some small things that I've learned, in regard to being competitive, but also a really connected team.
It's really interesting how those things, and we've just talked about the idea of grabbing shorts or giving touches or huddles, like all these things, like they may seem rather like insignificant, or like as us, maybe even as coaches, we may not like get it or understand it, but if your players believe in it and it means something to them, and it's something that helps them and brings positive energy, I'm of the mindset, all right, that's what we're going to do, and that's what works, and that's what they like to do, like let's do it. And it's really cool, just like those little things that you might not even think about as like really being that important, might be really, really important to a player and to your team, and might have to think a little bit outside the box to bring them together, even if it's ideas that you never really considered before. So I think that's really interesting, that like all these little things, even maybe like on an individual basis, may not necessarily in isolation seem like much, but if you add like a huddle, and then like touches, and the way that you handle timeouts, or the way that you pick each other up, like all those things, I feel like build on itself, then all of a sudden like you've really built something special just off of all those little pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I get so excited listening to it, and everybody's different in terms of their coaching style, but I will say, my twin brother Ben, when he was a manager for the Syracuse men's team, I worked their camp a lot, and I call them checkmark kids. So any kid that ran over and helped up a teammate, I give them a check, because this was during like a 1-day tryout period where the coaches would draft at nighttime, and it's the only camp I ever worked that did that. And a coach like, hey coach, like thank you for helping me with that drill, like they get a check, or if they talk on defense, check, or dive on the ground, check. And so and then I got a bunch of, I call them checkmark kids, culture kids, and then on the second day they went from breaking off together to family on 3, because they said like, hey coach, it feels like we've been playing with each other for months, and it's only been 2 days. And so those things I think matter at that age. And I think like like, yes, I could run some cool, like stagger screen or something like that. But I just feel like these lessons are a lot more important, for them, and they might not get it right now, but it seems like if that's what I'm emphasizing all the time, and then kind of let them play free on offense,
Sure.
I think it's a good balance. By no means have I figured it out. And today we had an hour of great practice, and then about 10 minutes of the scrimmage, and we went to man offense, and the varsity team walked in, and I felt like I had no control over what was going on. So I'm still learning so much as well. But it's been really cool to learn from some of the best coaches, and the Yale coach, Yale University, I worked his elite camp, which is one of the top camps in the country for kids that are trying to play in college. And I was very fortunate to have volunteered for him a lot, and he read the book and wrote a testimonial for it. And like exactly what you said, the small things, the little things that really matter to building a championship culture. And that means a lot to me, that I'm able to put something together that with the help of many, many, many people,
Yeah.
to make them aware of it. Nobody has to listen to anything that I've said, but like if there's one thing that you're like, hey, that, like, I'm going to try that. And I will say the last thing is, a few of the teams I've worked with, one in particular, their coach texted me after they had beaten the #1 team in their conference. And I watched film, and he's doing the huddle up sign. You can see him pointing, help them up. And it's like, and then they started winning more games. And so I just really think it comes from the head coach, and I don't think you'll regret, trying to do these culture things. And then, like you said, showing them on film, that's the best way to really emphasize it and praise it. And yeah, and I'm happy to, I share some drills in the book. And there's like a section for players to write in. So if anybody, I'm sure at the end or whenever that is, I'm happy to get on the phone and share any ideas, or talk anything out with anybody, just because I'm so fortunate to have learned from so many people.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And all of these little, it's like funny, it's like all like the little things that you do can really build up a team in a positive way. And it's almost the same way of coaches, like all the little things that you pick up from all other coaches and incorporate in your program kind of make you that much better of a coach as well. Like both of them kind of lend hand in hand, which I think is awesome. Um, are there any, and this isn't to put anybody on blast or anything like that, but in terms of like non-examples, are there any things that like maybe you think are like prevalent or like common in the coaching world out there that you just personally haven't really seen great teams do? I don't know if the best way to even phrase this is like any myths or anything out there, but are there any
Hmm.
things that you've seen from some of these coaches and teams that maybe go against like whatever you would consider to be like conventional, or the way that maybe um is popular or commonplace in the coaching world?
Like kind of like basically what negative teams do. Something like, is that what you're asking?
For a lack of a more graceful term, perhaps. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I do have a few thoughts that come to mind, but I'd love to hear, what your thoughts are first. And you said the word conventional, I automatically thought unconventional. But I would love to kind of hear, if you have a thought. If not, I could share a few of mine. But just, yeah, to hear where you're coming from.
There's a couple things that kind of come to mind, and I think that, and we've touched on this before, I think the idea of running, I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of those things where I see both sides of it, and I get it. And again, I've used it before. I've done it this year, so I know how this goes. But I think one of the things that is almost tricky for me in a sense is like making running something that's like a bad thing, or making running
Yeah.
seem punitive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, kind of goes against what I believe in almost as coaching, which is like we hustle, we run, we move from one spot to the other, like as quickly as we can, and don't waste time. And I don't know, like it's one of those where I'm not saying it can't be done well, but it's something that if I could get away from it completely, I definitely would. And I know that that's something that you've mentioned before. And I, I I think that I'm not saying anything in particular or anything like that, but I think that any drill that is only maybe working on like one thing, um, I think is kind of commonplace, and there's definitely a time and a place for that. But I think that one of the best things, at least I've personally seen or noticed, is like drills or things that just work on multiple things as game-like as possible, and trying to make practices simulate game conditions as possible, and not be afraid if like your practice gets messy, because like you have a few different things going on at once and it's kind of chaotic and it's kind of like all over the place, kind of like a game would be. I think that that's okay. I know I've fallen into a trap before of wanting to have like these really neat, really like pristine practices, where it may have looked really nice, but I don't know if we accomplished anything or really got anything done because we just sort of went through the motions. So those are a couple things that came to mind when you asked me that, but love to hear yours.
Yeah, no, those are great. And the running one, yeah, if you figure it out, you let me know, and if you need help
Yeah.
writing your book about it, because that would be awesome. But yeah, I mean, yeah, that I definitely would have mentioned the running one. The two that come to mind, one is only prioritizing your best players and just like investing your time into them. I've seen that a lot, and injuries happen, or life happens. Like, you just never know when you need your full team, and even beyond that, like, as you have human beings that you're so that you should just be grateful for, that you're able to coach and potentially have a positive impact. And I think there's a quote that says, like, a coach will have impact more lives than one person does in a year, or something like that, or whatever it may be. But you really have this privilege of being able to guide and lead, and these, whatever, the youth or high school or college. But it's like, it should be taken seriously, and looking somebody in the eye and giving them a fist bump and saying, hey, their name, because a name to everybody is the best sound in the world, is a saying I've heard. And just asking how they're doing, or just acknowledging them. I think that's really important. And then the other thing is just, negative teams or coaches, they just don't treat others with respect. And I love observing and watching, and I've seen, like, a coach of an opposing team not treat a ref correctly, which is not demonstrating the behavior that they should be displaying for their team, because then those same kids are probably going to be yelling at the refs. I've seen coaches yell at the scorekeeper, or something like that, and or a manager or a trainer. And I'm it's something I learned from Swarthmore College, when I was sitting behind their bench in an NCAA tournament game. Like, their coach goes around and gives the trainer a knuckle touch, or a fist bump, whatever you call it, and all the way down the line, to the managers, to everybody on the team. And that's a positive thing. So so those are a few that come to mind, for the negatives. And the great thing, like I said, yeah, just look over across from you, or in a game, if one team's huddling, like, watch what the other team's doing. If one team's warming up before the game, watch what the other team's doing, and just see if they're doing something you like. I think it's okay to, it's okay to copy somebody if you're impressed, or even asking the coach. I'm like, hey, I really like what you guys are doing. Like, how can you tell me more about that?
Sure.
I think that humility, is a great example for your kids. And I'm a big proponent of saying, if we win, it's you guys. If we lose, it's my fault. And that's, a good example for them. And so that's a really good question. Thank you for adding your insight.
I will throw a bonus one that came to mind, and I know I've done it before. Not saying I'm like a great coach or anything, but something I've done before, and I regret it. And I've seen other coaches do it, and I don't know, I wince a little bit when I hear it. Is and this doesn't mean that coaches mean bad when they say this, but I think it's really important to be very careful using the terms always and never when describing a player's habits and what they do. You say a player always, does this poorly, or they never do this thing successfully. I doubt that's true. And I just think, I think statements of any extreme like that, I think are problematic. And then the other one that I think is just one that, again, it just makes me sort of wince, is coaches who say things behind a player's back that I know they wouldn't say to them in person. or things, just venting about, certain things or certain behaviors or certain actions, but yet not actually having like a respectful adult like conversation with that player about those things, but rather just venting to somebody else about them. Like things like that, or I know they happen, and definitely, heat of the moment stuff. Like I get that, like you might just want to vent about a player or whatever, but I I don't know, that could venture into some pretty toxic mentality or toxic
Hmm.
behavior pretty quick. And again, I know I've been there before, and it's not something I'm proud of, but those are a couple things too that I think are somewhat commonplace, that I think if we could do our best to move away from them, I think we'd be the better for it.
Yeah, and that's really good advice. And I think we've all probably been there where we're venting about a player and maybe use those phrases. So that's a good tip that I will try to do better as well.
And lastly, Coach, before we hit our concluding segment, I know that you've sprinkled this answer throughout a lot of your answers here, but I did want you to talk about your personal transformation as a coach, or even beyond just being a coach, by your experience, by being able to have talked to so many coaches and seeing so many programs. What sort of personal and professional transformation has that allowed you to have?
Hmm. That's a really good question. Um, I think it boils down to just trying to positively impact as many people as I possibly can. And I was raised by two very loving parents, um, and great siblings and friends, and um, I just feel very grateful for that. And so if I'm, if I have information that I've learned because somebody shared it with me, it was a coaching drill or a drill or like a tip or something like that. I love to incorporate that into one-on-one training. I do a lot of training here in Connecticut with kids, um, and I think I'm just very fortunate to be able to try to be the coach that I did have as a kid. I don't have to say that I wish I had. I did have really good coaches, um, and not every kid I'm going to coach I'm going to have that same impact that I feel that the coaches had for me. But I will do everything in my power to make that kid feel valued,
Mm.
make sure they feel like they have a voice, and have some fun. I like to play music and dance and laugh, and I think you'll work. And basketball is fun, and sometimes these kids put too much pressure on themselves, and just building up their confidence with some easier drills and then doing some hard stuff. And then also just being like a positive person. Like sometimes you'll say, hey, how's it going, to somebody, and they should be honest, but I think you have the choice to be like, oh, I'm doing well, how are you? They just kind of be have the energy. And the world needs more smiles, more people holding the door open and saying thank you and complimenting a stranger for maybe something they're wearing. And that's I think something I learned in a book. It says if somebody walks out of their house and wearing something, they chose to put that on. So like if they have a Yankees or a Red Sox, or I don't want to get in that baseball territory, but like, hey, oh, like you're a Yankees fan, like people usually have something they want to share about it. And that's a great way to engage in a conversation with somebody or somebody you've never met, and you never know where that conversation can go. So kind of a roundabout answer,
I like
but
that. Yeah.
just trying to be nice and put positive vibes into the world is what I've been around and try to do.
Awesome. I think that's great. Coach, to wrap up, I give a couple questions to every guest. I'm going to go ahead and get started with this first one. And I know you've shared a lot of moments, so let's see if you got another one stored away there. But thinking back on your coaching career, um, or even your just career, I suppose, for lack of a better term,
Mm.
talking to all the coaches and seeing the teams that you've had, what is a moment in particular that stood out to you that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
Hmm. Um, I went to a Division 1 practice, and I was watching on the sideline and had my notebook, and I think they gave me a practice plan, which I thought was really nice. And I've been to a few practices where they give you the practice plan. So for any
That's
coaches that
nice.
have a visiting coach, I think it's great to do that if you print it out. And at the end of it, they did their little accountability circle, and the head coach like called me over. He's like, "Hey, come on, man! Like you just watched the whole practice. Like you can be in too." And like, you know, for me to be like at a, you know, on the Division I floor, you know, and just listening to them talk, it was only probably like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, but for him to include me, made me feel really special, I guess. And I love to try to be an includer, and I always try to say the circle can always get bigger if everybody just takes a big step back. So I just don't
like
want, you
that.
know, I think that that's something that's I've taken from just these people that make people feel seen and heard and valued, which I've said a lot, but that stuff really does matter. And whether it's just a quick acknowledgement, that's something that I think all coaches can do, is, you know, just being inclusive to everybody they meet. And going in with the mindset that there's something that person knows that you don't, and you know something, I don't know what it is, but you guys both know something that can mutually benefit each other. So, you know, try to engage and see what you can learn.
Yeah, there's always something, even if it's something relatively small, there's always something there that you have. And I think that's just a good tip for even coaches who maybe like somewhat inexperienced or somewhat new, who might not think that they have a lot to offer, but they actually have a lot of really interesting insights, you know, by being relatively new or having, you know, that different sort of perspective about the game, maybe even being a newer inexperienced coach that even somebody who's been doing it for a while can learn from. So I like that. Always believing that, you know, you have something to share and something to learn. That's really cool. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you.
To wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox. It's their platform to get out, you know, a final idea, a final message, and a closing thought. And I'm just going to give you the platform and go from there. And then when you're done with that, I am going to plug your book after. But so I got you on that. But yeah, so 60-second soapbox, but there is no timer, so don't worry if you go over. Go ahead, Coach. Go ahead and take it away from here.
Yeah, so I've listened to, you know, a good amount of your episodes, and I've heard some really good responses. I think and honestly, I didn't think of one beforehand, but I would just say the balance is something I've not always been great at. Like, I always wanted to be a college head coach, and because I had a good experience playing Division III, and but family is really important to me. And I just think being a coach at the college level is a huge time commitment. And even at the high school, like, it is a big commitment. And I love my family, I love my friends, and I think just, you know, investing time to your team is, you know, important, and you give them everything you have when you're with them and your preparation, but also be present with the people that are around you, and you know, send that text or that quick phone call. You know, somebody told me a few years ago that's really nice to call people on their birthday, opposed to just sending a text or a message on social media. So I've tried to do that, you know, with the people I'm closest with, and they seem to always appreciate it. So I think, yeah, just really, you know, investing in your people, in your circle. And that could be one person, could be two people, but just making sure that, you know, you're checking in on those people you care about, because every day is precious. And, you know, you just want to know that you tell the people that you love them, and that you're there for them through ups and downs. And that's probably the main lesson that I've learned and try to approach every day with.
Excellent. And as I mentioned, I was gonna make sure that you give a quick plug to your book. And I know you say you don't like talking a lot about yourself for it, but it's a real cool accomplishment. Help them up is not only a really cool saying and a good thing to have in sports, but also the title of your book. So is there a plug you wanna give to it, or something that you think somebody would get out of it if they were to read your book, or even just a little general synopsis of it? I'll leave it open to your interpretation, how you want to answer that question, but I did want you to get out the information about your book that you wanted to. So I'm going to give you the floor for that as well.
Cool. Good coaching phrase, the floor. And thank you, Mike, for that. Yeah, the title helped them up, and it's the subtitle, 14 Principles to Educate, Energize, and Empower Your Team to Build a Championship Culture. And pretty much, yeah, just the 14 principles that I've taken from some of the best teams in the country and learned from them, and so grateful for that, and put it into a book. And there's a section for coaches with a drill that they can do to incorporate it. And then there's a section for players to write in their responses. You know, like, do you help your teammate up, and how does it feel to be helped up by a teammate, and things like that, just to get them thinking about these little things that really do add up and make a difference. And they're all things that everybody can control. You know, they're just behaviors, and you know, it's not telling you to you know, make a Steph Curry 3-pointer or dunk like Giannis. They're just things that are helpful in life, and just to be a good person and good teammate. You can buy it on Amazon, and there was written with the intention to positively impact one person. And it circulated around a little bit, and I've gotten a few people reaching out, and it's just really fun to connect with anybody that loves culture, and to bounce ideas off of each other. And thank you again for your time, Mike. I've learned a lot from you. I took my notes, and I'll re-listen to this, and look forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Thanks again, Coach Horwitz. This is a lot of fun, and just a lot of things and you mentioned it in the outset, getting coaches who listen to it just 1% better. And I think this conversation can help any coach just get a little bit better, or at least the very least think about and reflect on their practices, and just be that much better for the players that we serve. So thank you. Best of luck going forward, not just with coaching, but with all the other engagements that I'm sure you're involved in. Hopefully any travel or anything like that is safe, and those conversations just keep on coming, and positive things keep coming from them. So thank you so much, Coach. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, and good luck the rest of the way to you and your team.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast, and we will see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.